We are back and we got a new PTR. Finally, it's version 3. Usually in Warcraft 3, we are blessed by 2 balance patches per year. 1 patch every 6 months. And the proposed changes are displayed to us in form of a test server. That test server gets thrown at us, and then we give feedback, and Blizzard is adjusting according to that. We have usually 2 to 3 versions of these test servers, and they come in waves of like 1 or 2 weeks. This time, Blizzard took a long time to update from PTR 2 to PTR 3. And that is probably for good reason, because they released a big Diablo patch, and maybe some people were involved in that. I have no idea what happened on the Warcraft side, but maybe there was something up there as well. The World of Warcraft side, I mean. And Blizzard has clearly been reading the feedbacks of Dondo and Savewalkers. They clearly read the feedback of Lawlight, Focus, Labyrinth, and Sock and Soin. And also they listened to Grubby. And all that is merged into the new PTR update. So you can keep on listening. I'll introduce the changes, then call you. All right. So I'll read you the notes, then I'll get Dondo on, and we discuss all these notes. So the introduction. I take it for granted that you saw the videos of patch of the PTR 1 and PTR 2 and will not repeat too much of that. So to get us all on the same page, here's the post that was posted today by KMax. We've deployed our final iteration of the 1362 PTR. We're aiming for early June as our target date for this patch to go live. At this time, we're limiting further changes to only number value changes or full reverts if necessary. Thank you to everyone who provided feedback from around the world. As indeed, a lot of people who gave their feedback were heard. So, these are the changes that are implemented in this PTR. Searing Arrow for Potom costs more mana again. The damage buff stays in. Force of Nature Treants. Mana cost increased from 85 to 95. Still down from 100. Tranquility, the ultimate of the Keeper of the Grove. Cooldown from 2 minutes to 100. Fan of Knives targets changed from 567 max targets to 666 across the board. This also automatically changes the max damage that one Fan of Knives does. A little bit higher now on level 1, a little bit on level 2, a little bit lower later. But the damage of on a single target from a Fan of Knives is higher on level 2 and 3 and lower on level 1. So on level 1, you hit more targets than before, but do less damage per target. Later, you hit either the same and do more damage, or hit less targets and do more damage. Wisps get an HP buff of 10. Nature's Blessing, the upgrade for Ancients to walk faster and for Treants to get more armor, is cheaper in lumber. That's the Night Elf changes for this PTR. Couple of reverts and buff mitigations and essential buffs to Wisps and also Nature's Blessing. And also the Warden gets addressed to hopefully get more of her play. For the Undead, the Haunted Goldmine now builds 5 seconds faster. This also increases the HP per second when you build it, so it gets harder to cancel Undead expansions. Curse in previous PTRs was meant to be used on mechanical units. That is no longer possible. Note that cripple can still be worked on tanks, flying machines, etc. Undead's got a new item. The Wand of Negation. It's the Dispel. That has now a 5-second cooldown, but requires a Temple of the Damned. So a requirement for an item on tier 2. Ghoul Frenzy was supposedly get a nerf at the attack speed damage. Now it gets a nerf on the movement speed. But they get 5-second research time back. Still a nerf to research time now, to research time PTR. Weakened by 5 seconds, that nerf. The Frostworm Frost attack duration, I think this is only the Frostworm. It's not specified. Is up from 3 seconds to 4 seconds, so more slow on heroes from Frostworms. Abominations do more damage. And that's the Undead. So nerf on curse, or revert on curse, nerf on double nerf on the Wand of Negation, nerf on the frenzy changes, buff for worms and A-bombs. Tauren was one of the most discussed changes on the entire PTR circle. They're back to tier 3 and build slower again. They get a movement speed buff from 270 to 290. If that's the right thing to do, we'll discuss with Dondo in a bit. Serpent wards on level 3 get a 2 damage nerf. So they stay the same on 1 and 2, but they get a nerf on 3. Wyvern give less XP from level 4 to 3. The glass cannons, killing them is less rewarding now. Is that the right thing to do? We'll see. Goblin Zeppelins are currently free in food. Now they cost 1. That will change FA a lot. Sundering Blades for the human. It's kind of weird that the Zeppelin is in here. Nah. So Tauren get a buff, but also back on tier 3. And Wyvern get buffed, Serpent Wards get nerfed. Quite balanced on, like balanced in a way of buffs and nerfs in power level for orcs. Human, Sundering Blades, the upgrade is not built in anymore. It needs to be researched, and now the lumber cost for that upgrade is cheaper. But still obviously a nerf to knights in the grand scheme of things. Riflemen get 10 HP. Fascinating. Dragonhawks get damage. Get a damage buff. Oftentimes they are just used for shackles. Now they get a damage buff. Flame Strike channel time is lower by 0.1 seconds. Control magic costs less mana per hit point on the summoned unit. Demolisher move faster, as well as glaive throwers move faster. Circlets cost 75 gold more now when you buy it from the shop or marketplace. And the Gloves of Haste, who were previously buffed to 20%, is now in the middle at 17.5%, up from 15%. Plus a lot of changes on creeps that will help the map makers to give us more creep variety with creeps. So, that being said, this is the changes. And now, I will get the patch master on the line. Because this guy, alongside Save Orcas, is gathering a lot of player feedback, is putting that all in a big doc that we use for balanced feedback. He knows a lot about this game, up to 2,000 MMR himself, plus millions and millions and millions of FlowTB games every day that he watches. And you know him, you love him, it's Dondolare. Without a working mic, apparently. Hiya. That's painful. Hello. Hello. Can't hear you. Maybe you're muted or something.
Are you there, you?
I am there, but you have the wrong microphone selected, my friend. Do you have me muted? Or deafened or something? You got wrong mic selected.
Now?
Hello? Yeah. That's better.
It went back to default for some random reason. Sorry about that.
No worries. Dondo, Patchmaster.
Yeah.
We were hoping for this discussion for quite some weeks because they took a long time to get this third version out. I already presented the Twitch chat and YouTube chat with all the changes they did. And now I want to hear from you. What's your first impression without going into too many details?
Yeah, good question. Like in context, yeah, we were waiting for this PTR. I was in there's national holiday today. It's like the National Day of Norway today. So I was not expecting to be sitting here discussing PTR patch, but it's nice. I did all my partying early in the day, so it's good. No, I mean, I think in general, from the few feedbacks I've gotten, there's certain things that depend on like your outlook on how the matchups currently are, I guess, and how the sums add up together that people seem to be mostly targeting. There's like some big changes where people think might be super big, or some people are a bit more relaxed about. So, but in general, the tone seems to be pretty positive. I think it's worth noting immediately that they basically state in their first sentence that they're not going to introduce any more changes. So now it's only about changing values or removing stuff, which I think also makes it easier to discuss everything than to just keep like adding more and more components. So yeah, that's the main impression.
Okay, so give me a thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, thumbs down. Where are you with the PTR?
Oh, I really don't like the like good or bad. Where you can, I think it's better to frame it more like how risky is it in my like way of thinking, like how many things can be completely or can like break the game, and I would give it maybe like a sideways thumb in its current iteration, and then maybe you could do certain stuff, or you could argue. People would probably different opinions, of course, on what maybe you could slightly reduce or change to make it even more like straight thumbs up would be the way I interpret the sum of the changes. But yeah.
All right, I give you my first impression.
Yep.
I hate the way they're doing this. Very, very, very much. I had high praise for PTR 1. I had high praise for PTR 2. They did this in a nice way. They, as always, threw some changes at us. Afterwards, they listened to the community feedback and they adjusted most of the things. Now, they got a lot of feedback from you, from Save Orcas, from Grubby, from the Koreans who got very active, which is a good thing. So, everything we see on this PTR, I think, is for like one way or another community feedback, which in general is a good thing. But all these people who sent their docs, you have to look at their proposals in context with all the other changes that they propose. And what Blizzard is doing is cherry picking a couple of things here, a couple of things there, a couple of things here and there, and then they blend it all together without any context. So, for example, the person who said that you should buff rifles a bit were also advocating for a peasant nerf, for example. But now the rifle buff is here, but the peasant nerf isn't. So the context is completely missing. It's just a big potpourri, and to me it feels like too many chefs ruin the dish.
Yeah, I get your point there. It's also that like it makes it a bit of a risky, since they don't have their own mission statement and don't have their own reasoning. It also, in a way, kind of invites infighting, in a way, because like people then tend to have obviously want to defend their own suggestions a bit and like try to put that in context, and maybe don't want to remove it completely, even if it doesn't even add up anymore, right? Because they feel like in of itself it also has some logical value. So I think there's several issues with it, and that goes back to the main. We've said this a lot of times. Like just having some general reasoning and at least a mission statement would also help the passion. Because if what we don't know is like if they truly cherry pick or if they cherry pick because they agree on certain statements, right? So if they say, okay, we feel like this race is a bit weak and this matchup should be targeted, then we can address that more directly. We kind of have to guess now. So it's kind of getting kind of both, like the cherry picking in, I would say, in the sum here is not terrible in of itself, maybe, but you still like have that issue of, do we actually know the reason why they cherry pick, right? So I totally agree with the concept of how they do it.
Yeah. While I appreciate them listening to the community, the mission statement of these proposed changes get lost when you blend it all together. So yeah, that's my first impression. Maybe people can convince me that it's all good, and I worry a bit too much. But yeah, we'll see. Where do you want to start? And
if you don't mind, my idea was to go through the whole like master log and just do.
Yeah.
I think it's like we do thing by thing, and then we do the sums of how it does. It's the only way my brain works currently. At least, so,
sure. We go from your doc or the master log on the forums?
Let's do my doc, because then at least I can like put some context in it, because then I also remember. But I think it's also my initial thing was I just like put some comments on values when needed or if I needed it, but also I just put in my initial like reaction to it. Is a small, okay, does it have a potential importance of being small, large, or medium, basically, right? So there's a lot of things that might like we initially think, oh, this is going to be huge, and it does appears to be nothing, and vice versa. But at least we can try to do like some mind, like start to think about like how much can this change. And I think it's the ones that have the largest potential impact we need to be most concerned about, right? In general, just as a general principle.
Yeah. Alrighty, then I'm in your doc at the main table. We start with human and the blood mage.
Yeah, so I marked in blue like the ones that are new in the current PTR. But yeah, I mean the flame strike channel reduction time. It's not a big change. It's like a quality of light change. It's gonna be actually a like significant buff for one player on the ladder, AKM. I don't think it matters that much for most other people. The reasoning for this change I can say, because I know kind of where all the suggestions are coming from. It's a sum of me and Save Orca suggestions that were compiled from feedback from pros. There's Low Liot that was compiled from feedback from the Asian scene, especially Korean scene. And it's from Grubby's notes, and also some unknown things that I'm not sure about. So that's like the one X factor. I'm not sure where the last couple of points are from. But in general, this point was originally our note, and the idea is to make the flame strike a bit more responsive. Currently, when you throw it, you have this like very small, but you feel it, delay that makes it sometimes easy to cancel the flame strike just by falsely removing your blood mage a bit early. So I mean, this is a buff because it gives you very like a tiny bit less time to react also against it. We don't see flame strike a lot these days. It's not like it's apparently imba, so I think this is just a good change overall.
Yeah, it's similar what they did to the priest Dispel. It's fine. It's good. Let's go. Let's move on.
Arcane Tower hero feedback has been that's one of the changes that's been through the whole PTR cycle now, so it's been discussed quite a bit. The idea, because you did a buff for the Arcane Tower originally from 12 to 16, I think a lot of people felt that mana nerf is a bit too strong. It's probably, I mean, it was warranted at the time, probably against the biggest problem humans faced at that point, which was the immolation harass from Night Elf. But that has also been weakened, both by values from DH, but also by other stuff. The way you play against DH. Moonwell nerf was, of course, impacting DH as well. So this feels like a bit too high of a value currently. It's you stick your hero in for like quite a few 2 seconds too long, you lose basically your whole mana pool. I think this is a well-deserved nerf for the feedback reduction.
Yeah, we talked about this on PTR 1 and 2, and our opinion still didn't change, so thumbs up for the Arcane Tower nerf. Sundering Blades got addressed again. Now they tackle the lumber cost. Any comments on that?
Reduce it by 25 from the last PTR. I still think like it would be. I think just making it an upgrade is enough. I don't get why it needs to be more expensive. Well, I feel like the Sundering Blade choice was more of a binary choice of either you keep Sundering Blades or you don't keep Sundering Blades. Now you keep it. Then I feel like if you keep it, then just keep the upgrade, because the main nerf for the skill now is just the fact that you need to do one more production cycle basically to get the upgrade. I don't think the cost matters, and if it matters, I don't feel like that's a positive. Like the few cases where you don't have enough lumber, I don't get the benefit from increasing the lumber cost. So
Yeah.
for me, I would just keep it at what it is, and require upgrade is fine, but don't do the lumber cost. I don't get like why. It doesn't address the skill itself, it just addresses the cost to get it. I don't think the cost at that point of the game is an issue, it's the time spent researching it, right? So that's the cost you're paying for the upgrade, not the wood cost. I don't think it matters. Anyways.
Yeah, agree to that. I heard some complaints about that, but not too much. People will be fine whether it's 175 or 150. Doesn't really matter, doesn't really change much. I think we also talked about polymorph at large. So any new comments on it?
No, I mean it's one of the most like unknown changes, of course. It'd have to be super meta developing for it to be very impactful. So I think it's like worth trying at least. I don't like I really try to think of like how will this completely break a 1v1 game, and it's like so hard to think of. And I guess the issue here is still like if you were very worried about team-based modes, but yeah, we'll see.
A big topic though is the rifleman HP buff. I think this was a grubby proposal.
The group approach also low light I think had some HP buff suggestion, but with other changes included, as you mentioned. And that's the same thing with Grubber, right? Also, his suggestions were meant as a whole package, so like it's a bit picky. I mean, it's a less than a 2% HP increase. It's not going to change any thresholds, from what I know. But it mostly, I mean, the more riflemen you have, the bigger of a buff it is. So it's a new buff to the already pretty strong pile rifle combo. I'm not sure that is in of itself warranted. I don't mean. On the other hand, I guess you can say like there's some warrants for a rifleman general. Like it's not that bad that they get a tiny bit better against maybe for instance elf, since elf gets many buffs. But it's kind of hard to see how this is reasoned along the other changes, because you also reduce troll headhunter damage, so you're kind of already targeting the orc human matchup in that regards. It feels a bit random, but that being said, I actually don't think this changes that much. I mean, it's 10 HP. If it was a breaking point of some like level 2 or 3 spell, it might do, but I don't think this is like hugely impactful. It just makes Pal Rifle even a tiny bit better, which is already a very strong strategy for how easy it is to execute. So yeah.
Yeah, from a philosophy standpoint, I listened and reacted to the Grubby video where he explained all of his changes, and he wants to incentivize one base human play, and I'm pretty much the polar opposite because I love human expansion games. I love the human tier 3 games because they're just so much fun watching. And of course, buffing riflemen goes against that because riflemen are one base. I don't really like that. We've seen it in the Weekly Cup final 3 times in a row. Like rifle push, win or not, and then it's more or less over. I do enjoy a fair share of inner fire rifles, but that doesn't really get tackled with this. Yeah, I don't like it. I don't think it's necessary. I might be wrong with all the Night Elf buffs coming into play. I think it's to me it's a wrong sign to how human is supposed to be played, but it will probably not be crazy dramatic either.
No, that's like I don't think it doesn't change. At least from my like first impression, doesn't move the needle much in any direction. But it's also like not. It doesn't have a lot of logic behind it. I would say I think there's like a philosophical difference between players, which is totally fine among like how should human be more targeted towards having more of an equal view on one base or 2 base. I think for me, I do kind of agree. I think it's kind of cool that one of the main cores of human identity is that they go for more human fast expansion, and like that part of the game is a bit like unique to the human player experience. But disregarding that, the old problem with like how you fix that, like how you move the needle to make one base more attractive, is that all buffs to one base will also be a buff to 2 base, right?
Yeah.
So this riflemen are also massed in quite big numbers against elf when you go expo, You can also switch to them actually with against Undead, which we saw 42 do against Happy. And this, so this is a buff to just general buff to Rifleman. I'm not sure it's warranted overall, so I'm not like super positive about it either. Although I don't think it's game breaking in of itself.
And of course, we talk a lot about like the uber pro level, but we've also seen a lot of lower level players very, very frustrated with the state of pally rifles because it's very oppressing and super easy. And of course, for them, it makes things even more oppressive and even more annoying. So, not too sure if that's too great for them.
No, I agree. So for me, this is not like not an unwarranted change in my personal opinion.
Same. If I had all the power in the world, I would scratch that. Would you scratch the Dragonhawk rider buff?
I wrote this as like a potential importance of that could be pretty large, and I think maybe people are sleeping on this a bit. Maybe they're not. So I remember like I did some math on it, like because we don't see a lot of Dragonhawks against Night Elf, which we used to see more back in the days. It was a pretty standard go-to against Warden play, especially, but even against DH and stuff, or Keeper on Terina stands, those kind of maps where you can kind of easily run around and like get the third base up by just harassing, right, and then just mass Dragonhawk riders. They kind of function the same way Gargs do against Elf. It was mainly Elf they're used against in mass. It's a pretty substantial buff, 10% damage increase. Because they used that if you press the tab that says regarding Hawks, basically. So they used to have like quite significant less DPS per food cost than Gargs had, right? They were kind of a lot worse against ground than Gargs. With this change, they're pretty more or less even in their damage output against ground as Gargs are. So this might be super strong. I mean, it will make Dragonhawk riders more used, I think. At least try to get used against Elf. There's other buffs that might counteract this usage. Maybe they also get used more in different matchups. Remember, you had like some games where Sock went fast exp against Orc, used Dragonhawk riders more of like a bridge unit to Griffins. Maybe even they're more usable against Undead now, because at least if they survive the battle against Gargs, they do more damage on ground. It's this can be a pretty impactful change, actually. It might be too strong against Elf specifically. My brain is just wired to be super scared about anything that has introduced like incentivized mass air strategies, because I'm personally not a big fan of like mass air, especially when it's like these huge number mass air strategies.
I was about to make the same point. I think Dragonhawks are mostly a utility unit. By shackles, you provided anti-air disable. With Cloud, you have an anti-tower support role. And can be masked in very specific circumstances. And this is something that's kind of allowed across the entire patch. Like we see the same with Wyvern. I also hate that playstyle. It's not cool. Warcraft is cool if you combine a lot of different units and you counter each other. And this incentivizes stupid one unit type mass air strategies with a bit of right click on top. That's boring with Gargs, it's boring with Wyvern, it's boring with Hawks, and it's boring with Fairies. Like, we should avoid this.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think mass air strats basically invalidates maybe one of the main core components of Warcraft compared to other RTS, except Heroes, of course, is the fact that you use collision a lot more actively in Warcraft than you do in any other game. And air units doesn't have collision, so it becomes like a bit of a weird thing in the game. So yeah, I mean, if you want to make Dragonhawk's Rider more as like is it a possible strat against Elf? Maybe you start with +1, not go straight to +2 would be my like way of thinking it, right? Because it's not that far removed that it was pretty common against, especially Warden openings. Maybe you can do +1 first and then do +2 if you still want to move in that direction and see if it's viable as like let's say like off meta strat that can be used sometimes. But yeah, would be my intuition at least.
Alrighty, Breakers got a buff. This was also part of maybe I misremember, but this was certainly a topic that Grubby tackled. I forgot the numbers he suggested because he wanted to change control magic that the spell is less efficient against wards, but has the same efficiency versus summons.
He wanted, and I don't remember the details either. He wanted to do something with the way like you calculate the HP they remove. So they have like a 2-part calculation that basically has something to do with the fixed HP the unit have and something that changes with much higher HP the unit has. And this just makes one of the parts. I mean, control magic is not used mostly because it's locked behind tier 3 and a research. So it's kind of, you don't do it that much more anytime soon these days. And I'm not even sure it needs a buff if you get to 3-3, right? Is this like one thing I like? It's super niche. Maybe it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
The few times a human player goes breakers against, and the other player goes tier 3 before the other, like for first player. So let's say you have a stalemate of breaker wars, right? Both have expos. You go one goes tier 3, sacrifices something for it. If the other player reacts, goes tier 3, he's now stuck with more breakers. The other guy is adding more knights. The one guy with breakers have an easier time stealing the water element than the guy with the knights. It's like super niche, but I don't like quite see like the benefit of this, right? It's because you moving control magic to tier 3 basically remove control magic as like a reused option that much, which is, I don't mind. Breakers were super strong units. It's not like I'm crying at bed at night because breakers are too weak. But this just makes them a bit stronger in the niche cases where they're already super strong. So I don't. It seems a bit. This is one of the part of where I feel like the cherry picking is very like proven to be random. It doesn't have any reason behind it.
I feel like they misunderstood Grubby's point because Grubby's changes made a lot of sense that you only tackle wards in the super late game, but not the summons. And I think it was a 2-part formula, and they changed only one part. So they straight up buffed it, which was not Grubby's intent. I think they got this wrong. And I don't see the big move here because it's tier 3 and it has all these downsides. But they misinterpreted it. And they probably should watch the video again and adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's just like for how it is now, it's kind of a nonsensical change.
Yeah.
I don't think it affects much, but it's like if the way it affects if the few times human goes tier 3 and can now just even easier steal wolves. It's like the one thing I'm thinking of. But yeah.
Maybe we do some number crunching and we have more later to that where some breakpoints get reached. But let's move on to the orcs. Yeah. The headhunter damage stays the same. I think we were all universally in favor of this as long as the berserkers aren't touched. And that's still the case. Wasn't addressed. Same for the witch doctor mana cost. For heal wards, we don't think that will do much, but it's a little bit of a help. Stays in, kind of nice. But the big topic, Tauren, Dondo, they are back at tier 3.
I think that is conceptually good that they're back to being like the ultimate unit of orcs in theory. I don't think this other change will make them the ultimate unit of orc, but to be fair, but I think like everything helps, of course. But I think like conceptually it's good that it's back on tier 3. I think maybe one of the ideas, like if they would be more willing to do more of a mission statement kind of patch, maybe like select a few units or a few metas they want to develop, and then Taurens would be like one thing they could target and look at closer. But yeah, because I can do the movement speed increase and the same degree, right? I don't think this conceptually changes what makes Taurens not that playable in 1v1, right?
Yeah.
It makes them a bit easier to follow the army because they now will have more inclination to go in front instead of like getting trapped behind because of collision. But you're still going to get slow trapped, you're still going to get focused on by magic units or spells, and they're still going to be hard to get their health up back again because they have so much health, which is Orc's main weakness, is health regen in general. So I don't think this conceptually like does anything with making the unit more viable. Though, I mean, of course, like every buff is not nothing, but it's kind of not. I don't think it will actually make them more viable in a general sense. Yeah.
So I made an entire video on this, and I talked to Lynn, and we displayed Cephid's amazing Reddit thread that he made purely about Tauren. And we came to a conclusion that the tier 2 Tauren wasn't it. And I think that's universally accepted now. Even though it would have been kind of fun to play around with it in some versions, but it's also nice that they're back to tier 3. But I don't think movement speed is an issue. 270 is totally fine, especially with endurance aura. Yes, they are falling behind when you move with that army, but that is due to their clunkiness. They just block each other all the time and get stuck somewhere, and it's a bit of annoying. Plus, then, of course, the enemy crowd control that you put on top. If you want to make them faster, you can use the speed scroll against slow, for example. But the crowd control is the issue, and we suggested something like Hardened Skin, magic resist kind of thingy in that topic, and that would, in my opinion, still be the better one. The movement speed is totally fine with 270, but they will still trail behind.
Yeah. I also think just like them increasing also seems pretty. I don't think you actually should change the animations because with increasing the melee range thingy, it's also to make it the same as subanimations.
Yes.
They have 100 melee range.
Yes.
Seems pretty obvious and low effort to do without much like. I don't think that's like difficult, but the very low melee range doesn't also make like that much sense. I would say just logically from their weapons and like how big they are. They're kind of like footmen with huge weapons, basically.
Yeah. This kind of confuses me a bit, this change, because I got confirmation that they saw the Reddit thread and saw the Tauren discussion, and then they do this. Like, it's a good thing they put them back to tier 3, but why this movement speed change? I am confused and a bit grumpy about this, to be honest.
I mean, it might just be like they didn't want to actually like maybe it requires more coding or stuff to give like bigger changes, and hence they wanted to like give them something. But I'm not sure.
Not really. You can apply a passive relatively easy. It could be a copy paste. Could be a copy paste from the Walker. I don't see this as an excuse, really. So yeah, a bit disappointed with that.
I also think the whole lagging behind the army is also. I think if like Taurens are played as little as they are now, you would also expect that to a certain extent. And while if that was played a lot more, people would also move them more actively, right? To be moved with the army. That's what. Same with that, like Undeads now move their ghouls modern uniform than they used to because they're getting used to that. They're actually faster, right? So stuff like that.
Another change I absolutely despise. Wyvern XP down from 4 to 3, which means, as you explained here, they give not 85 XP, but 60. People out there might think, why don't they find a middle ground with these XP values? Well, they're hard-coded, unfortunately, and we can only change the levels, but not the level XP values. So you're stuck between a lot with 85 or little with 60. And as you pointed out, with an exclamation mark, 30% reduction. I hate this. I am not a fan of Mass Wyvern whatsoever. I disagreed with Grubby, and I mean, it's kind of popular now that he sees Wyvern as a D tier unit. 2 days later, Lynn destroyed Happy with Wyvern only, which was funny, but hey, we all laughed about it. Wyvern are glass cannons, and they have the role of glass cannons. And if they die, then the heroes take over in the later stages. That's the dynamic we have now. If you give less XP, you will never get the high level heroes, and then Mass Wyvern becomes more oppressive than they already are. And that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, because this will only affect Mass Wyvern as a concept. Because if you lose one Wyvern, it doesn't like in a more mixed army. It doesn't matter if it gives 85 or 60 experience to that same extent at all.
Yes.
On the Mass Wyvern stuff or like strategy, I don't think this affects Wyverns viability against human. Elf is like a bit of a meme strat because in both cases it feels more like if human elf get the correct counter up in the right time, it's kind of like the game becomes pretty hard to win it no matter what the orc tries to do, right? So against human, if the human scouts it early enough, they have like you don't get like that initial harass damage from them. It's pretty rare that the orc on like a different equal skill levels can do much anyways, and I don't think this will change with the experience level change here. I think it's interesting because it's not correct, I would say, that I mean, it's not. I would say I think it's pretty proven that mass Windriders have not been the meta against Thunder for quite a while. It's only the thing that there's one player that played only mass Windriders for a while, I mean, at least a year, maybe 2 close now. But he's not been successful and that's focused. So we kind of don't think of, maybe people forget that that's like the only thing he plays against Undead usually. And now Lin has played like well. He won one series. That doesn't necessarily mean that much, but I think the general point is true, right? The way you counter Windriders currently, at least, is the fact that you bank on armor upgrades and good hero levels. And this really affects that last part, right? The hero level part. And I'm not sure if Fiends will ever be a good counter to Windriders. Like, it's in the current meta and how it works. It's just because it's so hard to get the mass up. They just don't like, they don't work in the same direction. So I think this change is super risky. It might, this is like one change that could break a matchup completely quite easily. So that's the risk you're taking here, I would say, with this change. It might not, but I think there's a significant risk you might completely break one matchup with this change in of itself.
Yeah, absolutely hate it. Grubby's complaints were somewhere else about the Wyvern, not this specific part. But to give them more playability, this is not the way. I demand this change to be deleted. Please.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want, I kind of agree that I agree that if you wanna, you could argue that maybe Windriders should be maybe have a bit of a different way they work. They should maybe be more buff, more strong in HP department, less of a glass cannon. You do. I think that's the way you start moving Windriders. You don't just make their glass cannon rolls a lot stronger if they're not countered, which is a bit weird of a way to solve it, basically. So if against the races they don't work, they still probably won't work, but in the one matchup they kind of work already. You just, I don't know, just give them a very weird directional buff. Yeah. So I would agree. I also don't think this is a good change.
If they really have to go through with this, this must go hand in hand with the damage nerf, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, if it goes through and it's not changing, we'll see pretty fast, I guess. But my intuition is this might be completely matchup breaking. But yeah, that's my first intuition. Seeing because even those games Focus loses against Happy, and he's lost quite a lot of them, they're not that is super one-sided, not close, right? So gotta keep that in mind. It's not a full you just win by auto. It's pretty marginal, and this change is not a marginal change to the XP gain for the hero levels. It's a big change. So yeah.
Alrighty, maybe a change that we can discuss together with glaives, because siege units now move at 240. That goes for demolishers, wagons, and glaive throwers. Is that a good thing, Dondo?
I remember Grubby suggested this with projectile speed, and I think that might I don't think making Siege better is bad in and of itself. I think Siege is underutilized in the game, and not because people don't know about its existence, but just because they're not that good. So I think this can be a good way to try to attempt it. They're still slower than most normal units, right? And you can say, of course, with Endurance Aura, they're pretty equal to standard unit, but if it gets chased, you'll still move it away out of the aura range, stuff like that. So I think this will be this can be fine. But you still want to be a bit careful with Siege in general, that Siege don't become too strong. I'm not saying this, I don't think this is close to making that happen. But Siege is a bit weird in the fact that it's now not used that much. People don't mind it. But if it becomes too strong, it's super oppressive because of the AoE, just the AoE principle of Siege. If Siege was too strong, everyone could just mass 5 Siege units. The game would be super boring. But I don't think this is risky, personally. This could be tested right before we can say that it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think in general it's a good thing. Speeding things up is usually good. And I still think the damage type is flawed in itself.
How Siege works, yeah.
How Siege works in general, that could be changed down the road. I like the suggest a change to switch or to increase projectile speed. I don't know if they're capable of doing that so that the animation doesn't suck. I don't trust that, to be honest. But yeah, it's nice. I take it. And I think everybody will appreciate the Shadowhunter change as well. 5% damage decrease for Serpent Wards on level 3. I guess we just give it a thumbs up because we wanted this for a long time. Yeah.
I don't think you can go that much further given the other changes, right? So that's also keep that in mind.
Yes.
Like if you could say this was like a super mostly target change against Elf, but then you need to keep in mind all the other changes combined that affect that matchup currently.
Yep.
So then you need to reduce that change in of itself.
Right on. Moving on to the Night Elves then, as apparently you have a lot to say about Wisp because there's 2 lines of annotations.
I mean, no, it's just comments. I mean, you can't kill a Wisp anymore by skeleton hit plus coil, which was like a super common strategy against Elf for Undead to kill Wisp in the early game. I think you also now you probably have like a close to 50% chance of surviving a DK hit plus coil with this 130 HP value. And you now Wisp survive Chain Lightning level 2, Breath of Fire level 2, and some other AoE spells they never used to survive it before. I think this is probably the most controversial change in the notes. People will have very strong opinions about this in general. I think like one general thing we can say about this patch suggestion is if you think Elf is already strong enough, you really don't like this. So the sum of this patch, right?
Yes.
And if you think Elf needs like a general buff, not only like targeted buffs towards matchups, but also like a bit of a general buff, this patch makes more sense, right? That's kind of the framing you need to have for these changes in sum to make sense. Personally, because I think we need. This is probably one of the changes we would mostly want feedback on. I think 125 is better because you still reduce or like basically remove the skelly plus coil thing, which is an interaction I don't like. It also like gives 50% chance more likely that the Wisp survives one more hit from a footman, ghoul, whatever that tries to kill it. So it's not a non-buff to other things, but 130 maybe makes Wisps a bit too strong against AoE and other stuff. But that's my like intuition. I don't necessarily disagree with Wisps getting a bit stronger, like in principle, because of I don't like personally the Skelly plus coil mechanic. I think that's a bit weird, and all other workers have gotten stronger, right? So it's not necessarily like a very bad change in of itself, but maybe the value is a bit too much in the first step.
Yeah, if they survive level 2 AoE spells, I don't think that's right. I don't think that should be right. Like, the investment for these spells is so high, and we've seen, especially versus Orc, I guess it's kind of rare, but Wisp Floods are there. If you invest 120 something mana to get rid of them, then that's good. Also with the Panda, I don't think they should survive this. Like, I am not sure if their HP should be touched at all, because they get another substantial buff with the Moonwell regeneration. Do we want to buff 2 essential things that buff Night Elf from the ground up? I don't think so. Maybe Nature's Blessing as well, as a 2.5 essential thing. If it makes the Night Elves happy, 125, maybe 130 dislike to that.
Yeah, I generally agree as well. I think 130 is a bit too much, but I think, like as I said, like this is a thing where you need a lot of feedback on. My guess would be that elves really like it, and most other players don't like it. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the best, but that's what would be my idea of feedback. But I think I mean the risk of doing 125 feels a lot smaller to me, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you kind of get you somewhat solve the same issue you already had. In a way, you make them a bit more strong in general. You make them a bit more survivable. You make them a lot more survivable against one mechanic that feels a bit unfair, quote unquote, in terms of investment versus cost. And you still get those benefits without maybe the possible risk of it being generally too strong of a buff compared with the other buffs in tandem, right? But yeah.
Right on. Potom. Before this PTR version, we were worried that we will only see Potom hunt mirror matches because of Searing Arrow buffs. Now the mana changes from 8 to 5 has been reverted, so the Searing Arrow costs the same as it does now, just does a lot of damage instead. Are we still worried about Potom mass hunt mirror?
No. But I'm not sure we needed to completely remove the mana reduction. But I mean, it's removed now. They say they're not going to add anymore. But I think our suggestion was to maybe reduce like mana from 8 to 6 or 7. Just like we thought, maybe doing both of the changes in like one direction at the same time, maybe may risk that. I don't think the damage change in itself is large enough for that to become like a super obvious move. That being said, I don't think Potom already in mirror is like completely unviable. You see it not that rarely, so maybe this is enough to kind of bump the equation even more to see it more as a variance in that matchup. The value for level 3 Searing Arrow now is pretty bonkers. Still probably not better than Orb depending on your micro though. So yeah.
Right. Then
it's level 7. It's level 7 Potom. I mean, if the opponent is level 7 Potom, you're playing an FFA or you have lost the game anyway. So I guess it's fine.
I guess so too. Keeper. Everybody universally hated the nerf to the buff to Treants because they were super cheap in combination with the Moonwell buff. And then every PTR tournament we did, we saw Keeper first Treants, Keeper first Treants, Keeper first Treants. It was so boring and so bad. And now they dial it down to 95 instead of 85.
Yeah, I mean, this is becoming a bit of a non-change, just to like it feels like keeping it to just keep it in a way, to keep the direction, you know. But I mean, 5 mana for every 10th cast, you get one more, basically. No, not 10th, every 20th cast, you get one more Force of Nature, right? So it feels maybe a bit like nothing changed currently with the way it's introduced. That being said, Keeper gets buffed in basically 3, like Keeper play gets buffed in 3 or maybe 3 directions now. So I'm not sure like even you need to buff Keeper if you do the other changes, right? So it was a bit of it's a bit of a like I think what developers probably, the feedback they're gonna get on the Night Elf things is you have this like list of 4 buffs that all affect the core gameplay of Elf. Maybe not all 4 at the same time, right? I think that's the way. Because I guess you have 4 game. If you say you go Keeper first or you go Warden first, then you have like 4 directionally equal changes that go in the same direction. Maybe you should not do all of those together at the same time. I think that will be a feedback from at least all non-Elf players.
Yeah, the 3 things you mentioned, of course, the Force of Nature buff, the Moonwell buff, and Nature's Blessing, which is cheaper, more affordable, lots more armor on Treants then. So yeah, 3 at once. And I totally agree. Because Keeper Wisp Flood, Keeper Treant Flood games are kind of boring. Keeper games in general rather boring in comparison. Just scratch it, Blizzard. These 5 mana, man.
I think general like it makes Blizzard easier for developers and us as well to just remove changes when they're very small and hard to measure anyways, and if we don't feel like they're contributing in any like really strong direction. I don't mind the Tranquility buff actually. Like personally, I don't think that's too bad but I mean this is more of an FFA problem I think than a solo problem, because in 1v1 at least you have counterplay to it, and like the way it works, maybe it's more that it basically gives the Eye of 20 seconds less of reduction between each heal up they do in their base. I'm not sure like it's that big of a buff, but maybe I'm too lenient on that change. I don't know, sure.
Tranquility even stronger, as you say here in the description, as 20 seconds down. I don't get this. I don't know who proposed this. I don't know why this is a thing. From all the channeling abilities, Tranquility is by far the best because you can use it out of fights. And now it gets buffed. When you also buff the Moonwells, I don't get it. I don't like it. There's no need to it. Who asked for this?
That's fair enough. I mean, I don't have strong opinions on it. I don't think I think this mostly affects, I guess, the FFA and team-based most though, like in general, because then you see Tranquility every game all the time, right? So, but yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I also there's no stated reason for this change, so it's kind of hard to decipher like what's the point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You probably have a way stronger opinion on Warden because I know you tinkered with numbers a lot and
these kind of changes are like up my alley. I like they're so like nobody understands them. It makes no sense. They're like worded so badly.
I saw this patch notes 10 minutes before or 5 minutes before going live, so I didn't do any numbers. I don't know any breakpoints. So tell me everything about these Warden changes because they come kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah. So let's do one step back. So before the change Warden last time, there was a general feedback from elf players that you used to see Warden, especially on certain maps, quite often, and now you never see it anymore. And they pointed to certain things that affected why Warden wasn't played anymore. And the thing that people actually mostly pointed out back then was the fact that Warden is very good at economic harass against human, against undead historically. Orc is Warden doesn't fit against Orc that well, so let's ignore that. And one of the things many pointed out is the fact that since workers have gotten more HP or more survivability in terms of acolytes, as well with movement speed and stuff, it's hard to get to do the eco damage part of it. So the original feedback we got from a lot of players was that they wanted plus 10 damage on level 3. Because it gives that plus 10, like it kind of reduces the HP buff the workers have gotten, give Warden more easily accessible to kill peasants without probably mattering that much against armies, right? That was like the reasoning behind those suggestions. That was also what we suggested in our PTR note. The actual thing they changed was giving it more targets to hit. So in a sense, if you hit the maximum amount of targets, you do more total damage. So it gives Warden it makes Warden a better fighting hero, while keeping her not better against eco-harass. If you hit 7 targets, which is of course the question, right? If you're going to hit 7 targets, this change kinda affects like something we mentioned in the PTR a while back ago. In that sense, so it feels like a bit of a throwback. That disregarding what's the sum of all these things, right? Slow words. You trade here a potential. You now have a potential of doing max 45 more damage on level 1 because you hit 1 more target, but you reduce per target 5 damage on level 1. Bit of a weird trade-off because Fork of Lightning, Phantom Knives, level 1 is usually not used anyways. You get 30 more damage in total on level 2 because you do 5 more damage per target on level 2. So you do 5 more per target, 30 more damage in total. And potentially 130 less damage in total on level 3 for a slightly higher chance of actually killing the units you target. So it becomes super difficult to disentangle how this actually affects. I think this is actually like a pretty significant buff in most practical cases. Except maybe when you want to just hit them the most amounts of targets. This is, for instance, a lot better against knights. I would say that it's a nerf against ghouls, a buff against knights. It's like the way I would look at it. So, but it's very like technical and a bit weird, and maybe like a bit too complicated to actually deal with like how this affects things. But I think if you keep all the other changes, that's like my point to Warden here. If you keep all the other changes, I think Warden is like one of also the things that might become like slightly in the risk zone of becoming too strong in certain aspects. Because you make the Wisp harass less vulnerable, you make the Moonwells give more HP and mana before Wellspring, and you make it easier to expo behind it and keep your buildings alive with Nature's Blessing, right?
And
I
the
think
Arcane
this
Tower
is more of a
burns
buff
less.
than a nerf. Yeah, Arcane Tower buff than a nerf less. You also make Zeppelin slightly weaker, and I would say in most practical cases, you make Phantom Knife stronger.
So, how good is it now versus peasants? Is it wrecking all the peasants again, like it did in the past?
No, because the period where you used to remember Warden wrecked peasants, where peasants had 20 less HP. So this is like half meeting that. I don't think it wrecks peasants anymore. now it's more or less never you go in, throw fire and ice, you never more or less one hit a peasant with the one hit of the warden after. Depending, maybe you have like 5+ claws, but let's say you don't, right? In most cases. This makes it probably, I have to do the math, but like probably makes it more of a 50-50 chance of the warden having a damage roll that kills the peasant with one hit. Maybe less than 50%, maybe like 40-30% actually. But yeah, so it's not like back to that complete same meta. And also you target one less peasant with the hit, right? So it becomes a bit hard to calculate how this actually affects every single thing. But I actually think the 10+ damage matters against the thing you usually go for human against Warden, which is Mass Knights. I feel like it's a more common counter to Warden than going like the pure standard tier 2, especially if you go Expo. But yeah, so it's kind of hard to decipher. Maybe in some with all the other things, you risk pushing Warden more and more into the Dota hero level, basically.
All right, no surprise that these proposals came from Lawlight, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I also have to say, like, we're going to get to Moonwell, so there's like a certain point there that is also interesting in the Warden playstyle specifically. But
right.
yeah, let's do the Glaive Tower things.
Doesn't really matter, I guess.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
We said the thing about demolishers. Same applies here. Little push to the siege units is kind of nice. Now, talk about Moonwell regeneration, because you apparently want to talk about Moonwell regeneration a lot.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot, but I mean, one thing is there seems to be like a lot of. This is also general buff to elf, so in some there's a lot of general buffs. This change is probably smaller than people think. I've said that before. Each Moonwell now gives 40 more pure HP per night, or 24 mana and 24 HP. Like if you want to split it to a hero, or 24 mana in just mana, or 24 HP and 12 mana, 12 more mana. So the values are not that big in the pure changes. At the same way, like if you actually don't use your mana during the night with the Wellspring, you lose the more or less the equal amount the other way around, right? How it used to be. So it's a buff, of course. It helps the early game, mid game to elf probably a bit, where they have been looked pretty weak in the tournaments we've seen, for instance. I would say compared to how they used to. So that was like always the general intent, I feel like, of the Moonwell changes back in the day, is that you wanted to reduce Moonwells as like your super high power level when you got the super wells, as they call them. But you wanted to keep like, because it's so hard to touch wells otherwise, because it affects everything of Night Elf gameplay in the early and mid game, right? So I think directionally this is fine, and I think we at some point just need to be like, this is Moonwells how they are now. We changed everything else because Moonwells are so impactful. People get crazy about discussing them, and I think it's better to just keep some things constant and change everything around them, right? Because it becomes super complicated. The one pointer I want to give about Warden specifically. So the nerf you get from Wellspring here, like the counteracting, is that you reduce the max mana the Wells can keep in their Moonwells, right? With Wellspring. Hence, it's only a nerf if you don't. It's only a nerf if you don't spend your mana during the night at some point, right? So as long as the Moonwells don't overfill, you don't lose anything.
True.
In that sense. The one hero that probably has the least chance of ever getting to overfilling is Warden, because of how active she is on the map, right?
I guess you could make a similar point to like a roaming demon hunter versus undead as well, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe, but maybe not as much, and also, yeah, maybe. But I don't think the problem with demon is that it doesn't come back with full mana HP. Like, it's very rare that it actually happens at the super well moment. I just like, so this nerf to Moonwells, I think in Warden play, quite often you will see that this is not like a counterbalancing act, it's a pure buff to Moonwells, right? So then you have like, okay, Wisps are stronger, Fan of Knives is, in my opinion, stronger, but I think people will maybe discuss a bit on that. Nature's Blessing is stronger, and Moonwells are stronger. Like, so it's 4 directionally equal changes towards one playstyle. And that's where it becomes risky, in my opinion. So just keep that in mind for Warden specifically, I would say.
Yep. This can also be said for the Keeper, of course, because we also, like, we can say the same, like a lot of changes that go into the same direction which is obviously the case if you buff fundamentals like a Moonwell, like a Wisp. And with that, there's a segue to the Nature's Blessing, because that does affect the Keeper and the Treants. It's cheaper now. Does it make mass buildings imbalanced?
And I don't think that's like the case, right? I don't think Nature's Blessing is of itself that huge of an. I mean, it's a huge upgrade. It gives a lot more survivability for the elf buildings. They're still weak against spell damage to a lot bigger extent than other buildings are. I did like an old tab on regarding Nature's Blessing, just so people know like the HP a Tree of Life have effectively is still less than all other main buildings without upgrades. So it's still like a pretty like in of itself not a strong unit, but this change is like maybe makes more sense. It's like a general buff again, right? And you need to keep in mind like what the general buffs are meant to. Like, is this in of itself moving the needle for elves a lot in matchups? Maybe, maybe not. It's just like a slightly you add one more general buff on the like general buffs, right? So this is like one of the things I would suggest if you want to keep. Like, you need to look at, I would say, like, at least look at some of the general buffs and either remove them or tone them down, because you give them more, like, you give a lot of them at the same time. Of the general buffs, so I do think this is in of itself probably the least impactful, but that's just in my head because it's just a lumber reduction cost. It doesn't fundamentally change the value of it. But night elves usually, the thing is, night elves usually struggle with wood. If you keep everything of this, night elves usually struggle with wood. They won't struggle as much with Wisp being stronger. So this cost reduction is then maybe not necessary, right? You have to do one of the two in my head. Like you either make Nature's Blessing cheaper so you get more access to it, given that you lose all their Wisps a lot more often, or you make Wisp stronger, hence you don't need to buff Nature's Blessing, right? One of two, in my head.
I agree. This has been commented on a lot. The lumber starving of night elves, especially that tier 2 moment. In general, I would like to make Nature's Blessing more approachable, because it feels like such an essential upgrade to have. It's also kind of cool that it synergizes with treants and buildings, and it helps a ton, and it comes at the nice timing at tier 2. I like a lot about Nature's Blessing, except if you don't research it and I have to point it out in the cast, but can't disagree with you that there's definitely a synergy with Wisps, and to a degree also with Moonwells, and then this. Yeah, I think it's the right change. Does it come at the right time is the question for me.
Also, you can maybe start looking at like, do you want to target wood cost or research cost time, right? Because like the opportunity cost thing again versus the actual resource cost, which I'm not sure like what is the most pressing matter usually. It's not necessarily given that it's the resource cost that is the biggest issue, but I would have to actually talk more with the players to get the good feedback. But yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, as a general point, disregarding balance and stuff, I just think it's hard for me to be negative towards research reductions in general, just because I feel like it's way too hard to get most researches in Warcraft. Like, I think it's just a thing that is too expensive to time, kind of like costly in time. So I like in of itself, I really just usually like every research change that makes them more viable, because they're not used enough at all.
Yeah, true. So let's move to the Undeads. The most loved and most hated race at the same time, probably. Nerub Towers is not changed. It's still piercing. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about this. Like, it makes them slightly worse against heroes and the archers piercing units. Better or equally good against most everything else. Makes them a lot better against dryads, for instance. I think the change was maybe more like directly targeting what we were earlier like thinking this change could target would be magic change, but then like magic damage. But then again, wouldn't hurt dryads. It gives like a different kind of issues. Maybe this is fine. I don't I actually think this don't much matters at all. But maybe it's. I mean, I would say like as a general feedback, this is super unpopular among the Undead players. That's just the feedback we need to keep in mind. So it should be defended somewhat, probably stronger than I currently have a defense for keeping it. Though I don't think it's actually that impactful, personally.
Okay. Haunted Goldmine, though. We've seen a lot of cancelled Haunted Goldmines lately, especially in Undead versus Human, where oftentimes the entire game revolves around cancelling expansions on both sides. So Undeads get a push and a bit of help in research time, which automatically comes with more HP per second in the build time, as you wonderfully put here in the comment section.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't make the fact that Haunted Goldmines against Human and the way they currently play not being vulnerable, right? So I think this is a good. I actually think this is a good change, because the one thing Human Undead matchup is currently super entertaining. But the one thing you could say, especially below the happy level, but I even think like happy is like it's a lot easier for Undead to get like permanently trapped and getting haunted cancelled and the game is over. And this doesn't change the fact that is still a risk and can happen, but it slightly reduces the risk reward like calculation here for Human in going in and kept trying to cancel the gold mine. So I think this is actually a decent change. I think if you reduce it even further, it's gonna also have like not possible knock-on effects of other matchups, which makes it risky to go like below 105. Because we used to see a lot of fast expansion against Elf. You now also see quite a bit of expansion against Orc. So if they don't go in riders. So maybe this, like, I think this is a bit warranted. We're also slapping a lot of nerfs in general on that for quite a while now. So I think we need to be a bit careful with over nerfing them, which is it's a pretty big risk at the moment, I would say.
I think in previous patch talks, I was against this, and I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, but I kinda like it now. At least I'm not bothered with it, because there's a bit of a development towards one base play of Undead versus Human, because people got so frustrated by getting their expos cancelled. And I figured out I don't like watching Tetfiend DK as much as I used to, because the two base play is just so great. It's peak Warcraft. It's never been better. No matchup has ever been better than current day Undead vs Human. And we need to preserve this with all our might. If we see a bit of Tetfiends here and there, totally fine. I don't mind that. But not every single game again. Please, it's not 2014. We want 40 versus Happy from Dubai. We don't want TH versus WFZ from WCA. It's not good. It's very binary and it kind of sucks. So a little bit of a push towards two base play is good.
Yeah, slightly reducing the risk reward, I think, for Human, like a tiny bit, which I think is also fine. It's a bit loop sided at the moment, I would say, currently, but yeah, it's fine.
Cool.
Good change, I think.
Ghoul Frenzy, our yelling prayers, suggestions, whatever you want to call it. We've been heard. We made a lot of suggestions for Frenzy for years. We talked about this in previous patches. On PTR 1, we said this doesn't matter if you only nerf attack speed. Then they put out PTR 2. There was still no meaningful change to the Frenzy. Then we made an entire video about, like, the title was "This change is meaningless" or something. And we did the math on Ghoul Frenzy attack speed. And we showed that it's meaningless. So what is meaningful? Research time and the freaking movement speed. And this is where they listen to us. Ghoul Frenzy, movement speed buff down from 80 to 50, compensated by a little bit of a weakened nerf on the research time.
Yep. I mean, this is one of the biggest changes in nodes for sure, in addition to the Wisp change. I think this needs. I mean, we can't say this needs to be tested like in a PTR environment, because it's not going to get tested properly. This needs to be tested over time in the live game. I think it's like we've talked about. It's super warranted that we try to target Ghoul's movement speed in general. They're basically used in all matchups and in against orcs. I mean, if we're going to say win riders should not become stronger, then we also need to do something about Ghouls, because the only way orcs play against Undead, I think, successfully at the top level is to go win riders, because Ghouls are so strong in massing and also just expoing behind it and stuff. If this value is too much, too small, too little, it's kind of hard for me to decipher. I just think, like in principle, this will still make it so ghouls with level 1 aura is equally fast to a knight, or a bit faster actually, tiny bit faster. Level 2 aura, they're now quite a bit faster still. So they're not slow units by any degree, right? Because so I think this is warranted. I think 350 was an insane value to begin with. You basically make a unit mounted by default and then add an aura on top of it. But this is going to have a lot of impact, I think, right? So this has to be monitored and how it affects the matchups. But I think it's warranted to at least try and start with it and see how it goes.
We are, since the end, like the beginning of time, basically worried about the 9-minute push of Night Elf versus Undead. We were kind of happy with the 60-second research time because it pushes that push further back. Now it's at 50, but ghouls move weaker and Night Elves in general are a lot stronger. So, where do we stand on the 9-minute ghoul push that we want to prevent?
That's interesting, right? Because you reduce the ghoul utility in general with the movement speed nerf. Maybe you save a bit less of ghouls in that push. Maybe not. It's a bit hard to tell. You reduce the increased reach time by 5 seconds. I was actually thinking about this like earlier. It might have an impact. It might not have that much of an impact. I'm kind of like a bit up and down on like how much this matters. Okay, so the impact of how when it hits is like basically none, right? 5 seconds. Okay, every second counts, but it's still 5 seconds. The movement speed, I wonder a bit, how much does the movement speed microing matters in that, like, you jump into the Nile base kind of push? That movement speed reduction is probably more impactful in longer drawn-out games with even more ghouls and more, like, over time damage dealt. So, I'm not sure, actually, like, how much it affects. But, I mean, of course it helps. If it's, like, this big game changer that makes like that push like now goes from this level to completely worse, etc. I'm not that convinced. I also don't think we want that, right? We don't necessarily want it to remove it totally as like an option or something you do to then do some damage and then you do like expo behind and stuff, right? So yeah.
All right. Curse on mechanical units is no longer working. I think we were all in favor of this and wanted this, so it's a good removal, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it basically makes tanks a zero thing. Though it has to be said, like, if there's going to be things they would even now start thinking about then targeting in the future, probably target tanks in some degree, right? Maybe.
Don't give them ideas to bring the attack back. That was horrible.
No, I mean, I just think they're like you could probably do easy stuff, just like reduce armor, do like something like that, or just increase their cost, or maybe just too cheap to just go full mass into like that last ditch push thing that some humans are doing currently, which feels kind of dumb to me, but of course it's a tactic.
Cripple can still target tanks.
I think this is good. Gives them a niche still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Curse duration, we talked about this. It was insane values, and it's better now.
Yeah. And I think like in practical terms, this is like it's not like a big nerf in practical terms usually, because you will usually have mana enough on Banshees to recast Curse after 60 seconds.
Yeah. All right. We end up with the items. Scroll of Healing still removed from the Tomb of Relics. Instead, one of Negation is in. It's still the 2 charges, 150 gold, but now on a 5-second cooldown, and it requires the Temple of the Damned. So, 5-second cooldown. We wanted a cooldown for like since we figured out it has no cooldown. 5 seconds. Is that enough?
Will you even get the item though?
That's another question.
So this whole like the one was very hard for me to decipher, because the feedback we gotten from like is a lot of if this and this happens, and then we never basically got to see it much in the PTR tournaments and stuff. And now it's basically moved to like now you have a building requirement, and it's a cooldown. So
it's a grubby
still
change.
Pretty expensive. I get the logic behind it, right? Because it makes you more like you're saying we give under the tier 2 dispel option, But you have to do some choices to get that. You don't go from having the slowest dispel in the game to the fastest dispel in the game without any trade-off, which I think is sensible and logical. But I'm not sure, like this, like does this change then make it so they're never gonna get the item? I have no idea.
I think it is pretty expensive. It's not as great as people think it is. And put it behind a barrier gives me a couple of headaches. Like, yeah, we kind of wanted people to move away from statues and destroyers every single time and open up a path to a life without destroyers, which would then probably require a temple anyway, because you can't. Now, can you live on fiends and statues alone? Maybe,
No.
but then you still have no dispel, and then it doesn't work. Like, if you want to go that route, you kind of want the temple anyway. But I don't think that's necessary. I think the cost is enough to make it a choice and to give it a trade-off. And this temple thing, this is one of these things that will be removed in like a year to make things more accessible, because in general we want to make things more accessible as a whole in this game.
Yeah, and I think like you will always get like stuck with the same logical issue of any like thing of making the spell more viable for Undead on tier 2. The fact that you still orb is so vital for that whole race to function. The frenzy upgrade would still be super important, just if nothing else because of lumber income. There's a lot of stuff that makes the whole idea of like Undead staying for tier 2 for longer. The only thing that will help with making the spell better at tier 2 for all enough is bridging the gap to tier 3, basically.
Probably.
So like the logic is not also like doesn't fit the rest of the race build, basically. So it feels a bit I'm not sure like how this it's also interesting. Like we do some things where like we have to just test the values over time and nerf if it's too strong, and now basically like I feel like we kind of nuked an item without ever seeing if it works in practice. But yeah, I'm a bit like neutral on this in the sense that I didn't like the core concept of having like a dispel item as the fastest like accessible thing in the game, but also this change feels like now the way it works now feels a bit unclear to me and how it's going to affect anything. But who knows?
Who knows indeed. Cryptlord, we were all positive on this, so this is fine. Also, no changes there. Nova, we all thought that is reasonable.
I really think, by the way, with the Crippler change and the Haunted change, maybe Undeads will hate me for this, but I think like you Undeads should experiment more with Crippler first against human with these two changes, and some also with the mana change. I think this like together should make Crippler more tested out against human than it currently is.
All right, yeah, wouldn't mind that at all. Where were we? Death and Decay, mana cost reduced, and decreased duration. Was that in this PTR?
No, that's our suggestion, I think, but it's there. It's like earlier suggestion.
Okay.
I made it up from like what the original ideas were.
I see. Yeah, so.
No, it's only that's reduced. I mean, the idea to reduce duration is that you're going to kill everything within 30 seconds. There's no point in being 35 because everything will be dead anyways if people stay in the range. But I mean, this is a decent change. Now, happy we'll be able to skill level 6 skill without using it with less mana. But yeah, I mean, it's like one of those spells that are actually like as a concept not bad. I would say, like if you said that to me as like when you made the game, it sounds super logical, but it just doesn't work in practice, right? And that's just the issue with channeling spells in total. Yeah. Usually, is that they can be cancelled, and that makes them weak.
Yeah, that's right. Can't cancel web though. Still cheaper. Still nice. A-bombs. They do 2 damage per hit now. Is that meaningful?
I don't think it's not meaningful. I don't think there's going to be like they still have the same as Taurens. They still have the same weaknesses. I think this makes it a lot less smart of human players that I still see like go just keep going full Divine Knights into if the Undead player actually produces more than like one abo. Because abos already like if you just like click them straight up, they don't trade bad against knights with equal hero levels because of the spells, the way spells work. And with this, you need to. I think like you actually would be needed with knights and need to add casters or griffins to give them a better counter to them. So I think this is not like nothing, but still doesn't remove like the main weakness, right? In that fact that you can then change other units that make albums pretty weak. And in most other matchups, you still want to just make one of them, and then the damage output of the one getting 6% more is not that important. But it's a fine change. I think it's deserved. Albums are not good.
All right.
As a general unit.
120 probably up in arms about
Love
this.
Yeah.
Frostworms get 3 buffs. Insane. Boneyard costs less, a little bit. Freezing Breath lumber cost is still not meaningful, so it doesn't matter. But we slow heroes longer again. 4 seconds instead of 3. Big return of the big blue bird.
Yeah, this is like also an interesting directional change because I still hold the view that like added in the right kind of army at the right time, Frostworms are still super powerful. It's just so hard to get to them. You just sacrifice so much on that way, it takes so much time. Maybe you have a different upgrade path. There's a lot of stuff that makes them like not that strong. In the rare cases, you add like that Frostworm to that strong army. Let's say you remember the She-Kappa game, right? For instance. Then it makes the Frostworm even stronger in that like case, right? Maybe that's fine. Maybe they're not common. So I'm not gonna say like, oh my god, these big blue dragons that destroy every ladder game is like now getting stronger. But it's a bit weird in the sense that I'm not sure it targets actually what like is their weakness. But sure, I think like cost reduction and especially time, like finding some way to just make them more accessible would be like the main thing in my head. But maybe this is fine. I don't think this like breaks anything because they're still going to be super hard to get to.
True, I agree. Congrats to Ito. He wanted this for like 4 years. He finally got 1 second. Nice. So yeah. Maybe Boneyard needs some time shaved off the building cost. I don't think we want to see mass Frostworms. So yeah, we'll see if that brings them more play. In general, tiny nudges towards A-bombs and Frostworms. Can't hurt.
No.
Gloves of Haste, we got the classic Blizzard testing in between values. I talked about this plenty of times. Like, yeah, I don't think Gloves of Haste. Like, I still have a problem with that entire drop table. It's not bad. It's not horrible. It makes this again stronger in the late game. Stays kind of weak in the early game. Doesn't fix any problems of the item. Makes it only stronger where it's already strong. I don't like this change still, but talked about this a lot.
Yeah. I kind of agree. It's also, I mean, this is like a change that Monk would hate, I think, with the 17.5 going like out of. I personally don't mind like values being whatever as long as they work. So people don't read the tooltips, and tooltips are often not that like explanatory, anyways.
Yeah.
That being said, I've been also pretty vocal about, and I don't think we agree that strongly on this, so that's fair. Like I think the main problem with that drop table is like item ring +4 being way too strong, for instance, stuff like that. Not the fact that Gloves of Haste needs to be that much stronger. So yeah, but I mean, this now you're getting to, I guess you're getting to values now where like it also becomes a bit of a non-change. So yeah, who knows like how much this actually affects anything.
Who knows? Indeed. Circlet though, we I think Save Orcas was asking for this. I know it was Lawlight, right?
Lawlight.
Lawlight was it?
I think if you look at the value you get from a circlet and how cheap they are, it makes like no sense in how it currently is. So Periapt costs 300, gives you 125 HP, right?
Yeah.
A circlet gives you 50 HP, 30 mana, +2 agility, and +2 damage. And I don't think these two items, when you look at it, are like that different at all. maybe at times point circle is better. Circle is better than periapt. In that sense, the cost was way too low for the circlet. That being said, I think this change might be too strong, like, or too big, because there's like maybe now you go from the point where basically a Farseer and Archmage still run into a Wake and Marketplace camp at the base start of the game to buy a circlet, which feels like it's way too strong, obviously, because you're willing to take like 125 damage just to get the circlet faster. For on any hero more or less, but this also like makes Blade Master plays and Demon Hunter plays maybe arguably as well a bit too. I mean, it makes maybe a bit too harsh of punishment to those playstyles. I think maybe going to 200, 225 seems more reasonable to me than 250.
All right.
That's been the feedback in general, I think, as well. Like, yeah, fine, increase the cost, but maybe go like find some halfway point between 175 and 250.
It's so funny because this item is so different from all the other items. Because usually when we would discuss something like this, we'd say, "Oh, you find this item," and then we look at the sell value. Because, like, usually items from a drop table should sell for the same value. Because then you have the same reward if you don't need that item. But circlet, you'll never sell a circlet. It's way too good. And you don't get that much of a reward because it's still in the shop and you want to be able to purchase it, so it can't be too high in value cost, in purchase cost. And you'll never sell it anyway, so it's very counterintuitive. I agree. If you guys say it's too much, then lower it, and then we do the classic Blizzard thing that we did at the Gloves of Haste and sell it for 200, and then it's kind of okay. No strong feelings. Direction is the right.
Yep, I agree as well. Like, you maybe change the direction, like change the size, but direction is fine.
Yeah. Ankh, still a good thing. We talked about this. Firelord also totally fine. Naga totally fine. Zeppelin cost, also a Lawlight suggestion. Food cost to 1. The FFA people have to rethink their entire game now.
Also, I mean, a lot of people actually, like, not only one, but a lot of players actually said, like, Zeppelin is actually the strongest unit in the game, right? Like, when you think about it.
Yep.
So I don't think, like, a nerf to it is unwarranted at all. I think this is also more fun, or, like, a better way, probably, in general, like, target cost or food or something, instead of just making steps. You could, like, make them super slow, but that makes them also super boring, because they're kind of unusable. But one thing I would say is, like, what's 0 to 1 is probably nothing. Except FFA, where like you basically have a lot of games where no base supply at the end. It's also a bit interesting for humans specifically, because humans are probably the ones that suffer the most from Zeppelin harass, arguably. They also do quite a bit of it though, but this actually is like, if you want to make Zeppelins weaker, you should probably at least make them 2 food, right? 1 food is pretty small. But if you make 2 food and you need 2 Zeppelins against Warden to keep your peasants alive, starting to become like a bit of a nerf, right? So it's
that's the 5th buff to the Warden then.
Yep, I mean this is a very small buff to the Warden against human, right? Because you would need at least one. Ideally, you would need at least 1 Zeppelin to keep the peasants alive. But yeah, I mean 1 food again. I'm not going to exaggerate and say like that breaks most games, but it's a nerf. If it's 2 food per Zeppelin, it would be like a pretty big nerf if you need to get 2, I would say. So yeah.
This could screw with some army compositions. This will be interesting, what the impact really is. But that's all the changes. That's 1 by 1, basically, with a little addendum, if we like them or not. So they said they're only going to do reverts, scratch things, or change values. So we don't have to talk about if something's missing or not, because we can't influence this anymore.
Yes,
they won't do this.
I'm still going to mention one thing, just to do it. AMS should not be the undispellable. And then mirror is still a nightmare, but that's the only thing I'm going to mention.
Yeah. You collapsed a couple of things.
I filtered too large if you want to do like your final thoughts, because I think this is like this changes that we probably need to think the most of in my head.
All right.
Gotta do this as well and just do Sorry, I'm just going to do one change.
Sure.
I think. So this is like what I've summed down to. You probably need to think most about as a community. People might totally disagree, which is totally fine. This is like the things in sum we can. I think people probably should think the most about of the changes.
All right, sum it up.
So the two first you can see now on the image is basically the possibility of making two different composition of mass air super strong. I think the Dragonhawk rider might be too strong against elf and might just make that like in certain maps very hard for elf in general. But it might not also. It's kind of hard to say because you also get buffs for the Warden elf depending on how many of the war buffs go through, of course. I think if you want to make Dragonhawk riders a bit better against ground, which I think is actually pretty warranted, start with +1. Don't go +2 immediately. My intuition. I think the second mass air thing is a lot more risky and can be potentially like breaking one matchup and could like hard to tell. Maybe it breaks every matchup because this is a huge change to the Wind Rider.
Yeah.
The fact that now heroes scales worse by killing them makes massing them a lot stronger, significantly stronger. It doesn't fix the core weaknesses of a Wind Rider build in of itself. But it does fix the core weakness Wind Riders have against Undead specifically in the current meta, pretty harshly. And it might can have huge knock-on effects in different matchups. And if mass Wind Riders become like the meta, even if it doesn't become meta on the top level, but just becomes meta in every like level below 2k4, like below the players, it's easier to micro mass Wind Riders than it is to defend against. I would say just like a general principle.
Yep.
So this can have like a super negative experience, like how it changes the ladder experience for most players, which we also need to be thinking a bit about, I would say. So
and
yeah, I'm super. This one I'm pretty worried about, I would say, of the changes.
From my talks with Lynn, obviously he said, "Well, I have to play them, otherwise I have no change. I tried everything else, but everyone else, like, why would you try everything else now? Like, why would you ever play anything else than Wyvern? Except if you're ultimately bored. But there's, like, they're fragile. All right. But otherwise, there's very few downsides to them. I am very much against this change. Oh, yeah. I'm so much against this change. Move away from mass air. It's not good. We don't want it. Nobody likes to play it. It's boring to watch. It's boring to play. It's not good. Move away from mass air if possible.
It also mainly, I would say, this change, like if there's meant to be a target, it feels like it has like Undead Orc in its bullseye, where we do a huge change that is affecting the ground compositions in that matchup, which is Ghoul reduction, right? With movement speed reduction. So it feels very wrongly timed in that sense as well.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Let the Ghoul thing play out. Wyvern are kind of fine. It's a sweet last resort. They're a role player, space creator, and speeds up creeping if necessary. For that, it's okay. Don't. I would almost add the rifleman to it.
Okay. I saw that feedback. I can do that as well. Let's do it. I agree.
Oh, I didn't even see. Didn't
no, I saw it in chat. I kind of agree as well.
Yeah,
before I get accused of any bias, sir, did I actually put some on that? That's bad. There, I do this, and then I do the collab thing again. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess
Google Sheets live is risky, but yeah. Rifleman is also like I mean, the change in values are pretty small, so I think this is less risky in the total kind of game sense than the Wind Rider changes because it's such a bigger change numerically. But that being said, it goes straight into buffing a very strong composition already. That can become even more popular among especially lower MMRs. I don't think like mass rifles is now an automatic counter to the Happy's 1-2-0s, maybe 1-2-0s actually, the lives and focuses of the world. But yeah, they don't fix. They just maybe just makes the ladder experience for anyone below that just even worse, right? For a kind of strategy that feels a bit too easy to execute already.
Yeah.
But Sorry, Lemes, don't get mad at me.
So, yeah, that is, I guess, what we have to do. If we have like a 1, 2, 3 sentences thing as a summary.
Yeah, because all the other stuff added is, I mean, we need to keep track of Ghoul changes because, like, if this basically collapses on that as like any chance in any matchup, we need to be actually aware of that. Like, it's a big change to one of the very, very core components of Undead, so we have to keep that in mind. I just added that like as a note we need to keep. And I think the last note that is like a sentence, do like a walkthrough of the Night Elf changes in summary, and maybe you have to like cut out or reduce 1 or 2 of them. Like just like, or not cut, but maybe at least reduce the potency of them a tiny bit, I would say.
Because there's
people might, they're synergetic, right? They're
synergy.
super
Yeah,
synergetic.
was about to say the same word. There's so many synergies because of you tackle core mechanics and a lot of core mechanics. Careful.
Yeah. That being, I just say, like, that being said, and I do think like we have spoke about like Niles getting a small general buff, I think is fine. Just need to be a bit careful not overdoing it in one direction at the same time.
Alrighty, so before we went into this entire PTR circle, we had a couple of issues that we pointed out. Do we fix all existing issues with this patch? I think this should be an important feedback thing, an important summary. Like, are current problems fixed with what they will be doing?
I feel like we're mostly directionally heading that way. If we actually fix them is a different question, of course. There's one thing I still feel like that Banshee AMS because of Undead Mirror and just general like play is a huge issue, but that's also a topic dear to my heart in a way because I just focus so much on it. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I actually think it's not like that bad in targeting the goals. At least I had like set for what they should try to target. But maybe I'm missing out on something. I don't know if you are, Neil.
Not necessarily. Some things go in a crazy wrong direction, in my opinion. Talked about the mass air already.
Yeah.
Some dull playstyles like one base rifleman, not necessary in my opinion. Some other things might be evened out, like undead expansions. Frenzy. Oh, I can't wait to see that nerf on the Frenzy. Yeah, Wisp 125 at max. Level 2 AoE spells must kill Wisps. Holy shit, I got a 50 euro donation. That's quite huge. Thank you very much, Steve. Been away for 5 years and you guys still improve from day to day, especially with the overlay insanity. Dude, a couple of people are not your opinion, but I take it to heart. 50 bucks, a lot. Thank you. Disrupting my train of thought here a little bit with that big one. I like the siege push. I like Wyrm A-bomb push. I like what they do with polymorph. Like there's good stuff in there. Night elves in general get pushed like obviously a lot right now, but I hope they dial back a little bit because they need that gentle push. The frenzy thing will impact almost all matchups, so that's fine, and things will even out. Some dumb mechanics like the Scroll of Healing in the Undead shop. I like this since the first version. So a lot of good in there. I miss a clear direction. I see a lot of risks. We summed it up. We warned, and now we pray.
Yeah, and one thing, Sevorkas, I should, because we worked on this together, which I think also should be mentioned. That has been quite like clear on our view, a point of view at least, like me and Sevorkas, and from feedback.
You're talking about Rings of Protection. We have to end the stream right now.
Reduce armor meta a tiny bit, just a tiny bit. Just do one of those changes. That's fine.
It's totally fine.
That's I think. Yeah, but good summary, Neo. Very good.
Okay. I guess that's what we can do right now.
That's a wrap.
I think that's a wrap. I try to think of like, is there any immediate feedback from chat that we have to like something that we missed, something where we're completely wrong? Like, tell us in the comments, I guess. If you're watching this on YouTube, tell us in the comments. Out of Warcraft, you can cut here. Thank you for watching. Once again, like 2 hours about some patch notes. It's crazy. Thank you for your time, Mr. Dondolare. Maybe we will crunch some numbers and then give a final feedback summary of sorts.
Sounds good.
Wonderful. So, now, Chad, what are you saying? What's the summary conclusion? Just tuned in. Just rewind. We just did the conclusion. Just rewind to it. As much as I love you, Echo Goodman, but come on, we're not parrots.
I think I can sum like these points I read is that which I think is fair. Undeads are a bit worried about the Ghoul change, which is I think is fair to be worried about, and I think it's worth looking at like after. I also think it's warranted that they are touched at some point now, or that they are actually try to move the bit in one direction. And people would mention that you did rifles quite a lot, I would say. So
yeah. Something that I saw earlier. There's not too much new to play with, right? We had in previous patches some new fun things like the Crow Talon finally working. Dreadlord experiments, stuff like that. That's almost completely missing from this patch.
You could argue you could try to like do a bit more siege and Dragonhawk, right? So like stuff like that, but it's probably more on the edges, right? Sorceress can be impactful, but feels a bit niche maybe to actually get play. Same with healing wards. They have done something, I would say, to try to push like stuff that has been, but they haven't done reworks in of itself as they did with the talents.
I think we're also up on a position after a couple of good patch cycles where we ironed out the biggest flaws, and now it's getting really, really hard to make meaningful changes without engineering.
I agree. Like, I feel like changes going now forward is probably... We'll see how this patch fans out. Of course, maybe there's huge issues, then we need to address them. But in general, yeah, maybe future patches is more getting even more play of the things that could be played more. Not necessarily that support units needs to be main units, but adding the things we want to add more. And secondary, I agree, like more maybe bigger engineering reworks of stuff that makes like reintroduce things in the game that are expelled from the game, basically, would be cool things. If that was more, if we actually got some sort of communication from the team, like some sort of communication that's more open to do, I think I could make like a really cool feedback round.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard if you don't get, because making these like huge, big suggestions or like, oh, maybe we should do this feels very rough when every time you see a PTR note and it's still like, we increase this by 10% or 5%. Like those changes become a bit meaningless to delve into, because they need a lot of thought to actually work properly if there's no hope of implementing them. Yeah. So yeah.
And as almost every time when we talk about patches, I put like a little or a big, I don't know how to put this. The game is still fundamentally broken. Like, the game needs to be fixed from the ground up, basically. So many bugs, so many things not properly working. We can't select sound devices in 2024 in a game. We can't change hotkeys in 2024 in a game. That is insane, the amount of stuff that's missing. The FFA ladder on Battle.net is apparently broken for freaking weeks. I don't know if that's still the case or not, because I don't play Battle.net really. Yeah, that is still necessary. And I know they see it as feature complete, but these features are bugged as fuck. There's a witty video called Reforged 4 years after, and it's mind-blowing in what state the game is. Doubling down, the campaign changes that you reverted in the last patch, bring them back. They were good. There's a bug. You can fix it, but don't scratch all the work on the campaign. Not necessary. But I guess that's just dreams. And
I agree. I don't have much to add.
I get so angry when I think about it, but yeah, it's just what it is. Yo. Okay.
Cool.
Is that it? I didn't see anything in chat. Is there anything worth noting in chat? Got him.
No, it seems pretty calm and collected at the moment.
Good. Nice. Dondo, wonderfully done. We'll probably be in Gym Discord to discuss this pretty much from the ground up again with people that are coming into voice chats and say the same thing that we just said.
Yeah, I'm always ready for a discussion. It's fine. I have like unlimited tolerance for that. So it's okay.
That's crazy. I want to shout out a thing that came out today. It's called Displaced Grid by eco-harass. There was a stream earlier, still have to catch it because I was streaming at the same time. That helps with Quickcast, for example, a feature that Blizzard wanted to implement, but couldn't really do it. So the community has to do it. And that could probably change how you play the game and how you control the game and how we bring Warcraft controls up to or closer to a 2024 RTS standard, which is quite meaningful. So this might be the new way to play this, from especially if War 3 Champions implements it. I'm very curious what the stream said. eco-harass at GitHub. Here is the link in the chat. It looks wonderful. It looks like something that we wanted to have from Reforged from the ground up. So I'm curious if this is all working and if people like it. So there's that. Once again, thank you, Dondo. Thank you, chat. Thank you, everyone. We see each other tomorrow for WAL and probably in some Discords. Peace.